Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us as we get into this session here. I'm pleased to welcome Lori Neufeld. So Lori she's involved with Inner City Youth Alive, and she's been involved with them since 2002. And while studying woodworking at Red River College, and then she joined the Bridge drop-in staff team in 2004. Lori is currently the Bridge Director, training and supporting young leaders from both in and outside of the north end of Winnipeg. Lori is an avid kayaker and loves spending time in the backcountry with her husband, Dan, and daughter, Finley. Today, she's going to be speaking on Crazy and Compassionate. Can I pray for our session before we begin? Heavenly Father, we thank you that we can be grounded in you, and we thank you that because of what you've done for us, we can have a right relationship with you, and we can walk with you. I pray that you would guide Lori as she shares what you have placed on her heart, and I just pray that you would help us to respond and to get lots out of this session. In your name, amen. So at the start part of the session here, we're going to do a few interactive bits. Lori's going to have questions, and then you guys can type in the chat your answers. And then after we get things going here, we're going to eventually just switch it so that the rest of the questions will get answered at the end in a Q&A. So I'm hosting the session here, and if you have any questions, I will field that to her for you. Okay, I will pass it off to Lori.
Okay, thank you. So I have to admit that I'm not a technology user, and right now I see all of your names and I don't see any of your faces. So I'm hoping you're there, and I'm sure Adam will give me a nod if he can see people, or oh, people are popping up. There we go. There we go. Hi. Okay, so let's get going. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm grateful that you're taking time out of your Saturday afternoon to join me and to have a conversation. I spent a lot of time thinking and praying about what we could talk about, what we could. How we can make this a little bit interactive. And that's really tough being on Zoom and everyone being in different places. But we're going to do our best today, and hopefully we have a good experience here. I'm going to start today kind of the same way that I would start a meeting that I would run at Inner City Youth Alive. So I run a team of mostly young people, and sometimes getting them involved in a meeting or excited to participate or contribute in a meeting can be a little bit tough. So we always start with some questions of the day. So the question of the day, I'll read out a question and everybody gives an answer, and it's their time to have the floor. Their time to say what they want to say and to participate, to know that they're there. And so we're going to do that. Now, obviously, there's a lot of you in here, so we can't all take time. Everybody's sharing their one thing. So I want you to either type it in the chat if that's your thing. If not, you might want to run and do what I did. And so I have white paper and I have a marker, and I just kind of do one of these, and that's how I contribute my answers. So however you want to do it, that's great. Adam is going to collect the answers, and I'll just read a few of them as we go. So does that make sense? Everyone's kind of on board with that? Yes. Okay, I see a few people. Great. So my first question is really easy. It's, what is your first name and where are you watching this from? So you can either type it, write it, do whatever you need to do. And Adam's going to collect that, and he's going to read out a few, or somehow we'll make it happen so we can all see what's going on. So what's your first name and where are you watching this from?
Okay, so we have Robin Plett, and he's watching from Steinbach, Manitoba. We have another Steinbacher, Karina Dick from Steinbach as well. They're both at it looks like the Gospel Fellowship Church there. So that's really cool to see you guys tuning in from there. Welcome.
Anyone else?
We have Ingrid Porter. She is in her dining room in Winnipeg. Welcome. Claire Olfert, she's from Winnipeg. A lot of Winnipeg people here. Welcome.
This is my sign that I pre-made. I'm in Winnipeg as well. There we go. My pre-made signs.
Well, I am not from Winnipeg or in Winnipeg right now. So maybe I'm the odd duck out.
All right.
Okay, we got a few more here.
More?
James and Darlene Peters from Winkler, Manitoba, and Mary Dreger from Winnipeg, Manitoba. So welcome here, everybody.
Nice. All right, next question. This one's a little more complicated. If you were transformed into a bug, what kind of bug would you want to be? If you were transformed into a bug, what kind of bug would you want to be? I'll present my answer. And I had initially said a ladybug, and then I researched it, and apparently it's actually a beetle, which is not a bug. But that was going to be my answer. It was a ladybug. But anyone else? The awkward silence.
Karina says, dragonfly, is that a bug? Question mark.
I'm sure it is.
I don't actually know.
Anyone else?
James says, Darlene wants to be an ant. He didn't say why. She just wants to be an ant.
It's great.
Robin says, praying mantis, because why not?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Nice. Okay, if more answers come in the next bit, that's great. Next question. This one gets even harder. If you had to sing one worship song for 24 hours straight, what worship song would it be?
So to our last question, James said he'd be a cricket. So
Nice.
that's not a bad one.
Nice.
Okay, Karina says 10,000 reasons.
Nice.
Ingrid says, bless the Lord, oh my soul. Not sure if that's the title.
I know what you're talking about.
I think that's also 10,000 reasons.
This was mine. My rationale was that it's a great song, especially great for the times that we're in, and it's not too high. So like a Christmas song, if you had to sing some of those notes for that would be very hard. Anyone else? No. Okay.
We've got Darlene says 10,000 reasons, and James says, how great thou art.
Okay, last question. Again, if more answers come in, that's great. But this is kind of geared to youth. So if you're not, you don't feel like you're a youth, that's okay. We're all youth today. But most churches have a youth room or a space where your youth meet. And so my question is if your youth group was given $1 million for a youth room facelift, what would you do with it? Now, when I picture youth room, I picture like floral couches and things from the 60s, 70s. So if you were given $1 million, what would you do with your youth room?
We've already got an answer. Build a gym.
Yeah. Yes.
You can do a lot of things in a gym. Nice, nice. Cody says, build a beach volleyball court and climbing wall. And Karina says, I think a water park is a great idea. And I think so too.
Especially today. I don't know where I know where some of you are, but it's hot. Water park would be sweet. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Again, if more answers come in, Adam, feel free to interrupt, but we're going to keep moving here. So thanks everyone for playing. And like I said, if you have any other questions or chats, send them, put them in the chat. Adam will take care of that and give it to me. And whether I actually respond or not, that's a different story, but we're at least going to try. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and how I kind of got to where I am today. So I grew up in Altona, Manitoba. And now my family lives in the north end of Winnipeg. So if you're not from Winnipeg or haven't heard at all about the north end, it's kind of an area known for a lot of violence and poverty and hard times. And it was designed that way from the very get-go. And we could talk a long time about how that happened. But that's where we're living now. We live really close to the water, which is great. And we love where we are and we love our community. But that's where we are. My husband, Dan, is an electrician and he loves to rock climb. He loves to take pictures. He's getting into fishing and hunting and things like that. So he's pretty adventurous and loves a lot of outdoors type things. Our daughter, Finley, she just turned 9 last week and she loves Playmobil and Minecraft and loves to read books. So I don't know where the book person came because Dan and I, that's a hard thing for both of us, but that's her. For me, being from the prairies, you might think it's a little bit odd, but I love to kayak, like Adam had said in the intro. I love the water. I love being on the water. I love whitewater kayaking. I get seasick, so the ocean is a little bit tough for me. It's a little bit awkward when I'm out there. But yeah, being on the water, I was out this morning, and there's just something about it that really brings me joy and life that keeps me going. I also love to build things. I love to make canoe paddles and furniture and stuff like that. I'm a true Mennonite, and I love a good deal on Kijiji. And I also love a good adventure in the forest. So a little bit about me. I grew up in the Altona EMMC, and now I attend Nassau Street Church. So I can see some of you from Nassau. So I feel a little bit like I'm at home. So it's good to see you guys. I'm a bit of a unique personality, and sometimes people my age or people older, they don't quite get it. I don't always fit the mold. But youth are awesome, because they're just so open and excited to do whatever. And that's where I connect. I really do. I love learning from young people. I love asking them questions. And I always come away with something new when I talk to a young person. So that's who I love spending a lot of my time with. And I guess lastly, I'm a storyteller and I love to ask questions. So today you're not necessarily going to have me give you the 3 main points on how to do youth ministry or how this crazy and compassionate thing works. I mostly want to tell you some stories of my life in the North End, my family, and the community that we've grown up in. And I hope that can resonate a bit with you, and we can have a good time chatting about that and learning. So that's me in a nutshell. So now that we've gotten to know each other a little bit more, this topic, crazy and compassionate. When the conference presented me with this topic, my mind went exactly to one story from when Dan and I were just starting to volunteer at Inner City Youth Alive. Oh, and I have paper notes that I am looking at. So you can hear the paper shuffle. I'm sorry. So it was fall of 2002, and Dan and I were getting to know a group of teenage boys. And so it had only been a few weeks. We were trying to fit in. We were trying to learn about who they were and how we could be a part of their lives. And they asked us to take them on an outing. And so in the naive young people that we were like, sure. So on a Friday night, we drove around in the North End, and we pulled up to this like super rundown house. And just waited there, and all of a sudden 5 guys started marching out of the house and piling into Dan's 2-door car. So the car was small and these boys were not so small. So we had people everywhere. And I hope there are no authorities or anyone on this call right now, because I'm fairly certain we had someone in the trunk. It was a bit of a nightmare. But we were ready to do this. And I guess ICY's policies on what volunteers were allowed to do, or I don't know if they just weren't keeping an eye on us or what, but that's the scenario. We're piled into this car. And just as we're about to go, one of the boys piped up with a joke. And it had some like cultural ties that all the boys in the vehicle could relate to, but Dan and I couldn't necessarily. So he tells this joke, and the whole car erupts in laughter, and the boys are just going at it. And Dan and I just kind of stopped short, and we looked at each other and we're like, do we laugh along? Is this our joke to laugh at? Is it their joke? Is it, we didn't know them very well, right? Like, what do we do with this? How do we manage this well? We want to be respectful, and yet we want to fit in, and we don't want to make it a them and us. And so you have all these emotions, but you have a split second to decide. And so we went with it and we laughed, and the vehicle laughed even harder. And I don't remember what we did that day. I have no idea how that night played out. I'm sure it was fine and we had a good time. But it was that night that I remembered just doing this crazy thing of just picking up these boys who we didn't even know, who most people would hear about on the news, and piling them into a car and just going to get to know some guys and having a good time. And I just remember being welcomed by them, and how they were just so accepting of us, and how we were just open to what they had to say and contribute to us as well. And those relationships have really stood the test of time, which has been pretty cool. And we still love being able to connect with them and their families and just watch how they've grown. But yeah, so when I think crazy compassionate, that was like the first crazy thing that I think we ever did in the North End. And it's one of those you had to be there. But yeah, it was pretty out there. Now, when I think about it, we read about the life of Jesus. We know and we understand the compassion that he had for people, right? He had compassion for children. He had compassion for the sick, the poor, the outcast. We can read so many stories about how he made time for people, how he'd go the extra mile to heal someone. He fed 5,000 people. Matthew 11:28 says, "Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." If that's not compassion, I don't know what is. Jesus was just full of compassion. And I think it's easy for us to have compassion on, a certain group of people or things that we can relate to in our lives or our families, everything. But having compassion for everyone and everything, that's, I don't know, to me, that's just a whole nother level that I can't even quite comprehend. It says in Psalm 145, "The Lord is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and rich in love. The Lord is good to all. He has compassion for everyone. His compassion on all that he has made." So we can see that portion of who Christ is, right? We can see that we have compassion, but we have to dig a little bit deeper to kind of really see the crazy or the unconventional or the courage that Jesus had while he walked on earth. I mean, if we think about that side of it, Jesus spit in someone's eyes to heal them. He kept sleeping in a boat during a storm. It's a little bit crazy. He hung out with the poor. He hung out with his racial enemies. He hung out with the unclean. Everything Jesus did on earth had a purpose, and we could spend our entire lives trying to understand all that he did. But what I really want you to know is that the who and the how Jesus did his ministry is really important to us to learn from. I don't think it's about being irresponsible or burning ourselves out, which is very, very common in ministry, right? But meeting people where they're at and balancing the gifts that God has given us, the things that God's given me, with the needs and the culture of the people that we're ministering to. So it takes a bit of both. Just because it's how I like it, or how what I'm used to, or my church, how we do it, doesn't mean that that's going to work wherever I'm going to minister to. I can introduce a video series or a game or a song to the youth that I work with at Inner City Youth Alive. And just because I like it does not mean that it's going to connect with them. And especially in the midst of the pandemic, everything we know has kind of gone out the window. So we really have to step out of the box, even if that sounds a little bit crazy. So that's kind of where I think about the crazy portion of this topic that they presented. Basically, we can see the compassion. The crazy part is like, okay, how do we do that, or what does that look like? And again, that doesn't mean necessarily being irresponsible. So, is that making sense? A little bit, yeah. So that same group of boys that I was talking about, years later, one of them, he was hanging out at home with his family. And it was late. It was a Saturday night, and families do things a little bit differently than I do sometimes. And there was a knock at the door, and it was this young man that I know. His little sister, like under 5, little sister, goes running to the door. She's going to answer, and he's like, "No, I got the door. I'll get it." I mean, it was late and all, and he opens the door, and before he even knew what was going on, he was on the ground, and his abdomen was just in agonizing pain. The ambulance was called, and emergency personnel worked extremely hard to keep him alive as they made his way to the hospital. But the reality is, the pellets from the shotgun shell that had hit his abdomen had created extensive amounts of damage. Days of critical care with a police officer outside of his door, they passed really slowly, but eventually he began to make a recovery. So our first visit was nerve-wracking, and we weren't really sure what to expect. Change the page. Not that page. We walked right past the officer. I guess we didn't fit the assailant's description, and cautiously entered the room lined with beds of recovering patients. As we approached our young friend, he greeted us with a huge smile and said, "Hey guys, see those urine samples on the counter? Mine's the reddest." We're like, "Oh boy." He laughed, but then he promptly grabbed his abdomen in pain. And we didn't tell him that a red sample wasn't exactly a good thing, but he was in pretty good spirits. And the recovery process was slow, but his spirits remained high the whole time. Eventually, we could take him for walks down the hall, and on more than one occasion, we got in trouble for exceeding the maximum speed limit of a wheelchair. And we later learned that the man who shot him was intending to hit his brother, a known drug dealer and gang member, but chose to take out whoever answered the door. Our friend made a pretty solid recovery, but his family continues to battle a life of hardships. And Dan and I step in where we can. We use our gifts of hospitality, of listening, a lot of listening, and offering prayer, while embracing a neighborhood and family traditions that differ from our backgrounds in pretty huge ways. So how do we know if we're being called to ministry? Well, that's not an if, that's more of a where and when question. We know that we're all called to serve. It's more about listening to that call and answering it. When I was in grade 11, I knew for sure that I was going to be a woodworker. So my dad really influenced me, and my high school shop teacher really encouraged me to pursue the career. And so I worked really hard and bought all the tools that I needed to buy, and made my way to Red River and started doing my program there. But at the same time, I still really valued volunteering and serving in some capacity. And through a friend, I connected with Inner City Youth Alive. And I just started volunteering once a week. And it was nothing like the YFC that I had volunteered with in Altona. It was not quiet. It wasn't like this chill atmosphere. It was really intense. I wasn't really a little kid person, but there were lots of little kids there. But I loved the team. I loved their heart for ministry and just their willingness to be there and to give it everything they had for that night. When I started my practicum, I was working some of the hardest and longest days I had ever done, building doors and windows and all sorts of things. But I actually started volunteering more, not because I had all this energy or time on my hands, but it was that volunteering, that being in ministry that was actually giving me life. And I just wanted more, and I was just craving that more and more. When InterCity asked me if I would consider working for them, my initial answer was no. I had just spent all this time and I'd spent all my money on going to school and getting this career going, and full-time ministry was just not an option. It had never been on my radar. But I had to ask the question, was this really my time? And was it really my money? God slowly changed my heart, and eventually I said yes to working there. And I thought it would be a 2-year journey. I'd do my good deed and then I'd head back to my, financially stable career. But it's been 17 years, and I feel that God's still calling me to be there, and it's hard. There have been so many days where I said, I can't do this anymore. The team is hard, the work is hard, the fundraising is hard. There's so many difficult things, but God just tugs at my heart every time and says, Lori, keep going. This is worth it. During the pandemic, it's even harder. I was supposed to be at work from our story studio right now, and we just got word we're working from home again this week. So here I am in my dining room, trying to do ministry, and it's not easy, but this is where God keeps reminding me that he wants me to be. But not all of us are called to do full-time ministry. Volunteers, essentially, though, will keep at most churches and ministries going. And InterCity for Life has some phenomenal volunteers. And we have volunteers that are emergency room doctors and engineers and military personnel and full-time law students and seniors and young moms and high school students and mechanics. We have people all over the map coming to serve. And they're busy people. They've got lots going on. They have families. They have all these things, but they see the value of doing ministry. They see God's call, and they don't say, "Oh, I don't have time for that." They say, "It's just a week, or it's of my summer, or it's just one day a week, or this is what gives me life. This gives me, the joy and the purpose that I need to go back and do my other job so that I can keep coming back here." So volunteering, being involved is an awesome way to be able to minister, and it's so helpful for people who are in ministry full time. But ministry also doesn't need to happen with a labeled organization. In fact, it probably happens more outside of the church than inside. But it requires us to pay attention. Moments and opportunities to share Christ are all around us, but we need to tune into those moments and what God is telling us to do in those times. But how do we do that? How do we tune into this and actually know what to do? It's a hard thing. The obvious and my number one, but probably the most difficult thing is to pray, to seek wisdom, and to get in the Word. This isn't something that we do as an afterthought. Ministry comes with a lot of hard questions, and you need to be prepared to answer them for yourself and those you're serving. In those days of my college internship, I got up early to read the Bible, and I just started craving it so much that I would, get up 5 minutes early, set the alarm 5 minutes early, just a little bit more. And my job was hard, and I needed to be in the Word in order to get through those days. There was also some hard things going on in my household at the same time, but it was, it just became this necessity. And I learned later too, that God was using that time to prepare me for what he had in store for me at InterCity for Life. So read and reread the Bible, study it with your friends, your youth group, people around you, and people who aren't necessarily around you, people that aren't in your circle, people who learn it differently or from a different background, a different culture. I think that's really important to broaden our range so that, we don't get this tunnel vision of how it has to be, because it looks different for all sorts of people. Pray for guidance, pray for patience, understanding, and discernment as you seek your opportunities to minister. So prepare yourself, be in the Word, be with God. So that's kind of my one little point, if you were going to give a point. Secondly, be on alert for opportunities to come your way. So for those of you who haven't been to Winnipeg or are not from here, Winnipeg was built around two main rivers. So I was trying to figure out which way I do this, so I'll probably get it wrong. But we've got the Red River goes up and down, and the Assiniboine connects with it like this. It might be actually this way, but I can't tell. So those rivers, they provided transportation, they trade, it was just of the life of a growing settlement. So these rivers are really important. The thing about the Red River in particular is that it's really muddy, it's really silty, and it's really dirty. And part of that kind of makes people afraid of the river. People think that it'll suck you down. There's just this fear of the Red River in Winnipeg. But the Red also has this unique situation because people desire waterfront property. We have big houses along the river with beautiful properties. We have national parks with paths and things that follow the river, and people are always beside the river. And then we have industrial parks. We have low-income neighborhoods. We have people tenting along the river because that's their only place to stay. So it's really this weird mix of this river cutting through our city that really varies from neighborhood to neighborhood. But now I love the Red. I was on it this morning. It was beautiful. It was calm, and I've never been sucked down the Red. I mean, I'm well trained and everything, but I just find it a very relaxing place to be. Now, a few weeks ago, it was the early evening, and I was paddling down the river. And usually I wear headphones, but I wasn't for whatever reason that day. And I was in kind of a tent city neighborhood, and someone called and said, "Hey, come on over here." So sure. So I paddled over, and there's this guy, he's probably in his 30s, and we start talking, and he says, told me he was from Saskatchewan, and he was in Winnipeg, but he didn't feel safe in Winnipeg. And he wanted to eventually, get enough money to make his way back home. But for now, he was living alongside the river. And so we talked, for a few minutes, and then he kind of caught me off guard. He said, "Do you know the Lord?" And I was like, yeah, I do. But he thought that I was going to just say like, no, and paddle away. And I said, "Actually, I do." And we started talking about God and faith, and we quoted scripture, and it just led to a really interesting conversation. And the reality is that you think that me, I'm kind of the one that has my life a little bit together. I'm the full-time missionary. I would have been the one to initiate this conversation, but it was him. And we talked for a long time, and eventually I had to go, and he was really sad that I had to leave, but my ride was waiting, and that's just kind of how it went. And I didn't pray for this opportunity. I wasn't seeking it out. It just happened, and it was a reminder that, hey, Lori, anyone that I could meet on the side of the river, anyone that I passed by, I could take that opportunity. I could be bold, and I could ask that question. And I was humbled, the fact that it was him that got this going. And it really got me thinking about how I do this ministry thing outside of my full-time job at Inner City. So taking advantage of those unexpected moments is really important and can lead to some really great relationships. So be on alert and be ready to answer, sure do. I sure know the Lord, and let's talk about it. when people ask about your faith. But if God is calling you to take a step further and volunteer or work at a church or a ministry, the opportunities to share Christ are pretty endless. Again, I work at Inner City Youth Alive. I don't know what you all know about the place, and you can Google it and learn a lot more. But even during the pandemic now, ICY has been full steam ahead, and it just has taken a lot of creativity and prayer and boldness to try things. So we're running cooking classes. So we deliver groceries and then run a Zoom call, and kids cook along with one of our staff. We deliver craft packages and food hampers. We can still meet with one-on-one with people outside. And again, that kind of changes from week to week, but we're doing everything that we can. And it always takes some creativity and sometimes a little frustration of how do we revamp the plan that we thought was working last week, but it's changed this week. But we're still going at it. One of the things we did was we put a bunch of information together, and we just started knocking on doors, telling people about their options for vaccinations or just places that they can go for help or assistance or anything that they want to do, and telling them, all right, you know what, we're not doctors, we're not professionals. We just want to give you some information. And it was amazing how grateful people were for that, because often for some of them, it's really hard to navigate the news, or maybe they don't have Wi-Fi or things like that. And so just being able to present with them with some things and say, look, we're here in the neighborhood too, and we're here to support you in whatever way we can, in whatever choices you choose to make. Our team still prays and worships in whatever way we're allowed to that week. And it's a great opportunity to be in prayer for our neighbors, for our supporters of Inner City Youth Alive, and the kids that we care so deeply about but can't necessarily bring inside the building. And the phone, we use the phone wherever we can, and not everyone has a phone plan, and not everyone has Wi-Fi, but really trying to reach out to our most vulnerable to get them through this time is really important to us. So yeah, we have a great team that's working hard. Like I said, I'm at home right now, and they all will be next week for a while, just as a precaution. But yeah, they're doing what they can in the midst of the circumstances. So getting creative is really important. I have to admit that I'm not the greatest at just striking up an outreach type conversation, hence my Red River story there. But I can do a lot with something in my hands. So knocking on a door with a casserole or a sign-up sheet for something or a care package with a note. These are small gestures that break the ice and can lead to some pretty meaningful conversations. And if they don't, you've still done a good work by encouraging someone and adding them to your prayer list for that day. I don't know if you've experienced this, but when someone I know is going through a difficult time, my initial reaction is flowers or food or childcare or something tangible. I need to do something for them. But then there's this voice in my head that says, but you don't really know them that well. Or, well, their freezer's probably full enough. Or what if they're not home? Or what if they have a food allergy? Or what if they think it's weird that I did something for them? And my mind goes on and on and on like that until it's a week late and I've done nothing at all. This happened to me recently, and my good intentions turned into a pathetic late to the game text. I was so disappointed in myself. But it was a good reminder of how quickly we back away from hard things that come with showing compassion. We need to be brave, and we need to get out there. Be okay with the awkward, the mistakes, the fear, and allow God to use you. And even during these difficult days, a postcard, a doorstep delivery, filling your local little library. I don't know if you've got those where you're at, but we have these boxes on the street. Fill them with some Christian books. Sending someone a Zoom link to your church. There's so much that we can do, and I don't believe that God is limited by 6 feet and a mask. I still think we can be doing a lot out there. It doesn't look the same, but I just don't think we limit God we should be limiting God in that way. So getting creative, that's what Inner City Youth Alive has been doing, praying through these things, and educating ourselves. That's a big one that I wanted to talk about. And I had a friend move to Nepal a number of years ago with her husband to do mission work in Kathmandu. Has anyone ever been there? Maybe, yes, no, I can't see you, any of you. So, well, maybe you have. But now, I read a lot of adventure books about whitewater kayaking and mountain climbing and stuff. So I kind of knew what kind of terrain that they were moving into, but I had no clue what kind of needs and difficulties they would be encountering by moving to Kathmandu. Wanting to support my friend, I assumed I would send a check in the mail and I would make care packages with her favorite Canadian items. Little did I know how difficult those common tasks would be in a third world country. The postal system there is corrupt. And so anything I would send would either be picked through, or my friend would have to go and actually give them a bribe or something just to get her mail. Sending donations was hard too. Find the line of work that they had chosen, there just wasn't any sort of connection to that. And so you just end up having to send an e-transfer and hope that it works. Even the smallest things about ministry just seemed really hard. Now, when the idea of going to visit them came up, I started researching even more about how to do the airport, which is actually crazy. If you have ever or have the opportunity to go to the Kathmandu airport, it is nuts. The climate I researched, the bartering system, the religions, the cultural practices, and on and on. I just wanted to know everything about where we were going to be prepared. And just when we thought we were ready, a few short months before our flight, a massive earthquake hit Nepal, killing 9,000 people and destroying some of their most ancient buildings that always stood tall amongst the slums of Kathmandu. The earthquake created an avalanche on Mount Everest that killed at least 22 people at base camp alone. And base camp is supposed to be the safest part of the mountain. More research, what to expect, how to support, who needs prayer. And then came the week before. And so we were about to get on the plane and learned that a long history of disagreements at the India-Nepal border left the only road access to fuel and supplies for Nepal closed. This had happened before, so our friends weren't really concerned. They just thought it would be a couple days and it would be fine. But within 24 hours of us touching down in Nepal, we learned more about the problems that this country was facing. And 3 days later, Dan and I were forced to leave early as the airport was about to shut down because no planes could refuel. We were stunned and heartbroken, but learned so much about the people, the culture, and the hardships of Nepal, and realized more than ever how difficult it is to share the gospel and bring hope to places like that. The fuel shortage lasted 5 months, turning an already miserable situation even worse. Whatever you see God calling you into, learn what you can about the people you're going to serve. Find out what the needs are, but also what brings them joy. What's the backstory to their group of people and how they came to be? If you're going into skateboard ministry, get to know the local skate parks, the shop owners, the parents who sit in their vehicles while kids are skateboarding. Get on YouTube and find out where the trends are, what kind of gear people are using, new locations, new tricks. Stay rooted and firmly planted in your faith, but open yourself up and be ready to do ministry a little differently than your average Sunday morning church service. Don't make assumptions and come to your own conclusions about what someone needs before listening and asking questions. We can be quick to judge, and that is a recipe for disaster. Excuse me. Bringing it back to where I am now in Winnipeg, I believe educating myself about the North End, the history of our First Nations people, and opening myself up to new ways of looking at faith have been an essential part of me being able to reach people at Inner City Youth Alive. And I still don't always get it right. And I'm always learning. I have to ask for forgiveness a lot and work through the many mistakes that I make along the way. But my compassion grows every time I learn something more about my community, and it makes those moments when we put ourselves out there in faith sound a lot less crazy. The more we know, the less kind of out there it really seems. I wrote a story for the conference for the website a while ago. So if you read it, I'm sorry for the repeat, but I feel like this kind of ties in well. So I'm just going to read that to you. I had a few last houses to drop off craft packages and groceries to before heading home on a snowy night the week before Christmas. The back alley deliveries to this one particular house near the Balmoral Hotel. Now that hotel is probably one of the most difficult, grossest hotels in the city, and it was kind of in that neighborhood. So it had become all too familiar over the course of 2020. And I didn't think twice about its location or surroundings as I pulled up and hopped out of my van. But as I loaded my arms with boxes of food, envelopes of stickers, and other materials, I noticed a man sifting through the garbage bins a few houses down. This wasn't an unusual sight for the neighborhood, and I continued to collect what I needed and make my way to the door. After a brief distant visit and some many excited girls, I made my way back to the alley and saw the same man directly across from my vehicle, rummaging for cans and other treasures. Realizing that I had a food hamper left over in my vehicle, I approached the man and asked, "Excuse me, if I gave you a box of food, do you have a place and a means to cook it?" One of those big questions that, we don't just make assumptions anymore. Here, I have this thing and I'm sure it'll help you. It might not if he didn't have a can opener. So, did he have a means to cook it? The man looked at me confused, but was happy to engage in conversation. He asked to see what I had, and I opened my back hatch. His eyes widened. The man introduced himself as Joe and told me he would love to accept the box, but he was on a bike and he stayed with his friend in the North End. So I was in a different neighborhood than where Inner City Live is. I offered to drive the groceries to the address, and he quickly used my phone to inform his roommate of the arrangement. Joe's repetitious speech was filled with excitement as he explained to the woman on the other end what was going on. We chatted for a while longer, mostly him reminding me over and over what the address was, which door to knock on, and who to ask for. I assured him I knew where to go and promised to be there shortly. He rode off on his bike as fast as he could in the messy snow conditions. I drove to one last house before catching up to him on the street leading to his place. Joe thanked me over and over again as he kindly unloaded the boxes from my vehicle while I supervised his bike. If you're not from Winnipeg, bikes get stolen a lot, so it was an important thing to do. The woman at the door had a look of shock and gratitude as he marched inside. We spoke a few more words, this time about what I do for work and how close this place really was to Inner City Live. He knew of the building and promised to wave at me the next time he rode by. As I turned towards my vehicle, Joe called out, "This is our lucky day. How could we be so blessed to receive all this?" I wished him a Merry Christmas and headed home. Crazy to go back into a back alley, hand your phone over to someone. I don't know. The compassion part is there, and God just calls us to do things like that. And it's just a small story of things that we encounter on a daily basis, that where we can choose to get in there or choose to walk away. If you've never driven down an alley, stopped to talk to someone picking through the trash, or dropped off a food hamper in the roughest neighborhood of your city, that's okay. And I'm not asking you to be reckless or endanger yourself, because that's how real missionaries do it. It's not. There are mission opportunities next door to you, in your classes at school, at the places you shop and play. And truthfully, those can be some of the hardest places to spread the gospel because of our own fears of rejection and or of humiliation. But start small and start now, because the longer you put it off, the tougher it will be to get going. Our lives can become all too comfortable, and we can quickly ignore or put ministry off to the side. And if we don't start, the chances of us ever actually doing it later on is really small. I'm going to end with a story of hope. So it was my first summer at Inner City Youth Alive, and I was asked to be the support staff on a canoe trip. Now, I was really still new to outdoor adventuring, and I was more of a kayaker, and I'm not a canoeist at all. They're very different things. Excuse me. So I was really out of my element. I had also never done paddled rapids before, so I was pretty green to all of this. And the trip started out really tough. The vehicle got stuck. It was super muddy. The water was really, really high. The bugs were crazy. And we had 4 teenage girls from the heart of the North End who had never even, a number of them had never even left the city before. So this was some pretty new territory for all of us. And I felt bad for our leader because she had done the trip before. She was all prepared, but it was just a lot more than what we expected. So we get on the river, and it's hard. It's hard going. The portages were hard, running rapids and canoes tipping and collecting gear and dealing with bugs and fatigue and all these things. Like, it was just, it was more than I think that the two of us could really handle together. And very quickly, the girls that we were with, they got to their breaking point. And the second last day was in particularly hard. And we were all tired and just super exhausted. And the girls really started just getting angry. And by that evening, they were in the water and they were just bad mouthing me and the other leader. And they couldn't tell that we could hear them up on shore, but they were just really, really mad. They wanted to leave, but we were on an island. You know, how were they going to take off? It was, it was really disheartening to hear that. And they stormed off to bed with no supper. Usually we split the tents and have one leader per tent, and they refused that. They had all of them wanted to be in their own tent. So it left me and this other leader in our tent that night, just asking ourselves, why did we do this? You know, this was crazy, like, and so unnecessary. Is this really what God had called us to do that night or that week? Why would we put ourselves out there so much and just really wear us out when we weren't really seeing any results to what we had been trying to accomplish? And we lay there and we were praying for the girls and praying for each other and tending to our bug bites and just listening to them just say so many hard things and rude things to each other about us. And again, they probably didn't know that we could hear what was going on in their tent. But eventually they got quiet and we're like, okay, it's time for bed. Let's relax. We tomorrow will be a new day. And suddenly there was like a knock at our tent. Now, you can't really knock on a tent, but we knew someone was there. And we just hear, Lori, Tracy, can I come in? And our first reaction is like, no, we're tired of this. And what are you going to do? We've been hearing all these hard things, like, that you want to do to us and stuff. And okay, fine. Yes. So we open the tent, and this young girl climbs in the tent and she's sobbing. And she sits down and just starts pouring out her heart with all the hard things that she's dealt with in her life. Family struggles, friend struggles, just the hurts that she has dealt with in so many ways. And we just let her talk. And eventually she looked up and she looks at the two of us and says, you guys have something and I want it. And we spent the next hour or so talking about the Bible, reading and praying with her. And it was just this totally unexpected moment that took us all just by surprise and overwhelmed us. And we jumped out of the tent and celebrated by looking up at the sky, and it was full of stars. And then the mosquitoes came and attacked, and then we quickly got back in our tents. But it was just something totally unexpected. And nothing on that trip that we had endured could have prepared us or even helped us imagine that this is how it was going to end for this young girl. It was just an incredible reminder. And this young woman that, she's actually almost my age, and we talk still once in a while, and she's doing well. And, her faith journey is still a hard one. Her home life is still a hard one, but is doing remarkably well. And she reminds me every time about why God called me into missions. And for so many people that you don't always necessarily see the fruit, and you don't really know what God has done in their lives. She reminds me every time that God is doing really good work. He calls us even when we don't feel adequate, and wants to use us in a variety of ways. We just have to be open to that. So pray, study, get creative, get out there. God has plans to use us.